Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex has all the elements of my favourite Crash Bandicoot games, yet seems purposefully designed in just such a way to inflict the most mental anguish possible. So for those of you who don't know, The Wrath of Cortex is essentially the original Crash Bandicoot 4 and his 6th generation debut, i.e. it came out on the PlayStation 2. It was released to mixed reviews, and fair enough, it was the first series to not be developed by Naughty Dog, instead being developed by Traveller's Tales. Now, following up the original trilogy was always going to be a near impossible task, especially moving on to the next generation of consoles. And unfortunately, many people believe that it just didn't live up to the legacy, and honestly I find it hard to disagree. I personally have a long history with this game, having completed it many times as a kid. Granted, when I was younger I found it quite difficult and often had to have my brother do some of the harder levels for me, but suffice to say I actually really liked this game growing up. Having replayed it recently, however, I have to say I'm torn, and this is coming from somebody who actually used to enjoy Crash Bash. Hyperbole aside, this game is so close to being good. And not to spoil my whole thesis here, but I do think that Traveller's Tales were both too safe in trying to emulate the greatness of the prior games, while also being too ambitious with the sheer amount of things they added. Essentially, this video will explore The Wrath of Cortex as a sort of half review, half retrospective, wherein we can establish what exactly the game does so wrong, and how it ends up falling so short, becoming one of the most frustrating platforming experiences I've played for a short while. That said, I do actually like this game to an extent, and will also be highlighting where the game succeeds. I think this is quite important because at the end of the day, while it might not be as good as the original trilogy, The Wrath of Cortex is still a decent game, and I do think it's overhated, which, granted, having written this script and knowing where it's going to go, this may come off very negative. But I did just want to say at the beginning, all of my criticism really does come from a place of desperately wanting this game to be good. So, without rambling any further, let's get into it. To begin to understand why The Wrath of Cortex misses the mark, I think it's important to take a look at what made the previous Crash games so beloved to begin with. The original trilogy had great level design, engaging, well-designed boss fights, and perhaps most importantly, tight, responsive controls. While playing these games, platforming felt deliberate, with the player being able to find a rhythm in navigating levels. In the first game, which incidentally is both the hardest and my least favourite of the original trilogy, I wonder if there's a correlation there, we were introduced to the core features that made Crash Bandicoot the platforming juggernaut it is, or was, if you're being critical. That being satisfying platforming, interspersed with bosses who were true tests of the basics you'd learn in the levels prior, with a healthy dose of Crash's interesting treatment of wild animals. Classic Crash. Crash 2 refined everything introduced in the first game with tighter jumping, better level design, and the introduction of more complex movement, crouching, and more importantly, sliding. This meant there was more for the player to master, like slide jumping, and when you did get it down, it was incredibly satisfying. With all new themes and vehicle sections like the jetpack, this game also showed just how well Naughty Dog could design levels, not to mention the introduction of secrets, like the famous blue gem in the first level, that you could get by not hitting any boxes. Side note, I do think the original being set in one location, essentially having Crash make his way up the island towards Cortex, with the level themes and difficulty reflecting this, was arguably superior to the warp rooms used in later games, with progression feeling more like an adventure, rather than a series of individual levels. Crash 3 was my first Crash game, and to this day remains my favourite of the series, and my second favourite PS1 game behind Digimon World. It expanded on everything Crash 2 had improved from the first game, and then went even further, introducing time trials, vehicle stages, and water levels that weren't terrible. Importantly, these elements felt fully integrated into the game, with thought and care taken to ensure that these departures from the classic formula felt just as good as the platforming, and perhaps more importantly, didn't overshadow them. Also, Warped added super moves, and with maybe the exception of the Fruit Bazooka, all of these felt great to use and were useful within the game. Remember this part for later. To summarise, the original trilogy grew and built upon their predecessors by adding to them creatively, while maintaining a level of quality that rewarded skill and fairly punished mistakes. Look, I don't have to tell you why the original trilogy are great. If you're watching this video, chances are you're a Crash fan and you'll have played them yourself. You know what makes them great. The Wrath of Cortex, on the other hand, tries to do the same, but instead seems to just throw ideas at a wall to see what sticks, adding in perhaps too many new ideas without any thought for the careful balance that the previous games struck. But let's look a little deeper. From the first level, you'll notice immediately that this game doesn't feel like Crash. The jumps are floatier, his movement lacks the responsiveness of previous games, and momentum feels inconsistent. It really feels like sometimes you mess up a jump because Crash just didn't travel far enough. And don't get me started on the monkey bar sections. Why does Crash move so slow? Warped got this right. Why does it suck here? Sorry, I got a little carried away there. The point I'm trying to make is that if you strip away everything else, a platformer fundamentally has to feel good to be a good game. That said, while the game doesn't feel great, credit where credit is due, it looks pretty good outside of the cutscenes, yikes, and sounds incredible. The theming of each level is creative and varied, and the accompanying soundtracks are pretty much all bangers. Case in point, the medieval levels both look and sound great. And it's no surprise when these are the closest we get to classic Crash, and just goes to show how close this game is to being good. Which is the most frustrating part, because it's almost like they want us to dislike the game. Or at least that's how it feels with how the game controls. The next thing you'll notice about Wrath of Cortex is just how much they crammed into each level. I mean, look at this. I'm getting a headache just looking at it. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, the original trilogy had carefully placed obstacles and enemies, which meant that you could fairly intuit how to get around the levels and learn from any mistakes. Wrath of Cortex decides that that is a load of rubbish, and instead bombards the player with an endless barrage of hazards and poorly programmed AI. I mean, look at this guy. Also, why is he throwing beanbags at us? Can he even stop? And look, I like nitro crates as much as the next guy, but this game just loves to put them quite literally everywhere. I mean, they're so prolific that they added in a power-up specifically for walking on them, which outside of a very few specific situations is purely useless and 100% the lamest power-up in the entire series. This in a vacuum is one thing, but alongside the issues I have with the movement, these overcrowded levels have led to more than one cheap death, which is just frustrating. Because I'll tell you what, I am by no means amazing at these games. I've had my fair share of deaths that were absolutely my fault, and I'm happy to take credit for that. But some of the deaths in this game, caused by the game, had me furious. The original trilogy had a great variety of levels to play outside of traditional platforming, Coco jet skiing, or riding a tiger along the Great Wall of China, the motorbike, the jetpack, I could go on. But whereas these levels were generally once or twice per warp room, as a little treat in the original trilogy, Wrath of Cortex takes the idea and turns it up to 11. I'm talking minecarts, helicopter packs, the dreaded rolling ball levels, and even more plane levels, but somehow worse. I mean, there's even an alien-style power loader, which in concept is freaking awesome, but because of how frequent these levels are, they just feel gimmicky. Not to mention the fact that they don't feel very well implemented. Like, come on, this is a Crash game. All I want is to spin some enemies and jump on some boxes. We really don't have to reinvent the wheel. And these are just Crash's levels. Maybe the most disappointing thing is we finally get to play as Coco in a platforming level, and how does it feel? Yes, quite awful actually. She can't crouch, her spin is like a weird kick. Oh, and naturally because Traveller's Tales just can't help themselves, these levels often end in skiing or a tsunami chase on a scooter. Naturally. Speaking of water, the Crash 3 levels are back, but are so insufferable that I needed to dedicate a whole section to them. In Warped, swimming under the water felt fluid, pun intended, and while the levels were challenging, this made them bearable. The Wrath of Cortex water levels are maddening, and seemingly go out of their way to get you, with the biggest offender being these bloody mines. You see this thing right here? This is the bane of my life. Because of the verticality, these often can't be seen before they're already dropping on you, which gives you very little time to move out of the way of their very generous hitbox. But what about the audio cue, you ask? Well, you are right, that does help, but with how slow you seem to move, by the time you hear it, it's too late. I mean, sometimes they're even hidden behind the scenery, which just feels unfair. This means, more often than not, You end up having to cautiously move through these levels at a snail's pace, carefully testing the path for mines, which would be fine in a different game, but just doesn't feel good in this one. The only thing that feels better here than in Warped is the death tornado spin under the water, which gives you some good speed and is actually quite useful. And then there's the submarine. In Crash 3, this was a reward for playing well, giving you the option to blow stuff up, and even taking a hit for you when you get caught out. The submarine in the Wrath of Cortex is forced on you, dies in one hit, and controls awkwardly. Like, why even give me the option to turn to face the camera? These levels are essentially 2D. Also, because the sub is so big, you're even more likely to get hit by a mine that's dropped on your head. As a little unrelated to the water levels tangent, this is also the issue with the power loader, because it moves clunkily, and again, forced on you, makes your hitbox big, and dies in one hit. So what's even the point? You could argue the benefit is the fruit bazooka, but you get that as a power-up separately, so there's literally no benefit to this power loader. What's truly diabolical, however, is how shortly after crawling your way to the end of the first water level in the second warp room, you are rewarded with yet another water level, or at least half of one, in the same warp room. If that doesn't demonstrate the issue here, I don't know what does. Perhaps my greatest disappointment in the Wrath of Cortex comes from how Traveller's Tales use bosses. The original trilogy had a diverse cast of villains for Crash to fight. Iconic villains like Dingodile, Engine, Entropy, and Tiny. And don't worry, you get to see these characters in a cutscene in which they all moan about how they all got beat by Crash. Visually, this cutscene has aged quite poorly, especially when the later PS1 games have aged as well as they have. This game was on the PS2. What's wrong with your face? Incidentally, this opening cutscene is approximately 10 minutes long, so get used to looking at these faces. Oh, my mistake. The classic villains are in the game, but not as bosses, instead as regular level enemies on a few specific ball levels. I mean, how disappointing is that? These guys used to have their own arenas with tricky fights. Now they've been reduced to this. Instead, the main boss fights in the Wrath of Cortex are against the new main antagonist / rival to Crash, Crunch, equipped with these elemental masks that are hyped up to be super dangerous, but instead just kinda disappear after we beat them. Crunch is uniquely disappointing, because in concept he's amazing. He's another Bandicoot that Cortex successfully turned into a weapon, which, if you know Crash's story, is what Crash was meant to be until he escaped. This sort of mirror match with Cortex's perfect version of you could have been incredible, but instead we're forced to fight Crunch like 5 times, 4 of which are just bad. I mean, the last battle isn't bad really. I mean, it's weak by other game standards, but in this game it's actually quite a standout. Having to deal with each elemental mask gives the boss a certain variety, which is missing in the other boss fights. I think the mediocrity of the boss fights in the Wrath of Cortex are perfectly shown by the first one, and oh joy, it's a ball level. So the idea is we have to avoid Crunch while hitting these small rocks, turning them all to our colour, which damages him. The issue is that when Crunch hits the rocks, they either reset to being neutral or light on fire, depending on if we had touched them already. To turn the rocks Crunch has hit back to our colour and progress the fight, we either have to wait for them to return to normal, or hit them ourselves, which of course damages us. Oh, and also, Crunch is actively trying to get us and will finish us in about 5 hits. That is if you haven't been returning Crunch's rocks back to normal, which will have also damaged you. Now, I'll admit some people do like the ball levels, and in concept they're cool. I'm not a fan, but the physics here just make this boss fight a chore, because trying to dodge Crunch while also trying to catch these balls that are rolling around, while also rolling around yourself, is quite a task. On replaying this fight, there were so many times that I'd have 3 out of 4 balls turned to my colour, I'd be coming up on the one that I need to hit, and Crunch would just change some back, which is fine, but just dragged the fight out longer. Now, don't get me wrong, the boss itself isn't a ridiculous challenge or anything, but it just isn't very fun and takes a really long time if you get unlucky. And the cherry on top is that for beating this boss, we're awarded the bloody Nitro sneaking power-up, which isn't even good. And the other bosses aren't much better either. They include a jumping puzzle, playing tag with Crunch, and a Crash 3 engine ripoff. Again, these bosses had great potential both conceptually and given the previous bosses Traveller's Tales had to build off of. However, they just end up sort of disappointing, which is like a theme for this game. Final point, playing this game again for the first time in a while and looking at it critically led me to one conclusion. This game so desperately wants to be Crash 3. From the water stages to the plane levels to the car race levels, Wrath of Cortex just rips elements directly from Warped, which would be fine, but these levels are more like poor imitations of the ones in Warped, and while I would love the opportunity to play Warped again with new levels and challenges, since this game doesn't play nearly as well, I'm left feeling like I should have just loaded up Warped instead of Wrath of Cortex. So where does that leave Wrath of Cortex? Like I said before, I'm torn on how to feel about this game. I understand that Traveller's Tales had enormous shoes to fill, taking over Naughty Dog, especially trying to go back to the original formula. And conceptually, I do really like this game. I want to like this game, but the choices the devs made feel deliberately designed to frustrate the player, with floaty controls, artificial difficulty, and cheap gimmicks used to incite nostalgia for the original trilogy. I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh there, and Wrath of Cortex was trying to pay homage to the first 3 Crash games. But at the end of the day, I can only speak to what the game is actually like, and unfortunately, it just falls short in every way that matters. And I'm clearly not the only one who feels this way, considering Wrath of Cortex was replaced in the series by Crash 4. For me, revisiting this game was a trip down memory lane. I have so many fond memories of playing this with my mum and brother. It's not without its charm, with some genuinely great level concepts complemented by great sound design. However, it's difficult to look past the negatives to enjoy these aspects. After all, this is a game, and therefore gameplay is the most important thing. Ultimately, Wrath of Cortex fails to live up to the legacy of the original trilogy. It's a game that both tries too much to build up on its predecessors, while also rehashing ideas, but worse. While it's easy to criticise, I feel like I can't bring myself to fully hate it. It's not bad, strictly speaking, just kinda mediocre and disappointing. And I think mediocre really is the perfect word for it. It's like a 5 out of 10, which on its own might be okay, but given the series that it's in, does not hold up well. Anyways, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you for listening to me yap, I really appreciate it. What do you guys think about the Wrath of Cortex? Feel free to let me know down below in the comments, I love hearing other people's stories and experiences. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps me out massively. If you'd like to support the channel financially, you could become a channel member for £1.99 down below. Sorry, I don't know what that is in dollars. I'm English, I'm sad about it too. With all that said, hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.